The flashing hazard lights blinked like a dying heartbeat on the side of County Road 12, casting orange pulses across the empty stretch of asphalt. Officer Henry Collins slowed his patrol car, squinting through the windshield. It was close to 2 a.m., the dead hour, the hour when instincts mattered more than protocol. He didn't like what he saw. A silver sedan sat crooked on the shoulder, engine off, driver's door closed. Not smashed, not smoking, not wrecked, just wrong. Cars didn't sit like that unless someone left in a hurry, or unless someone couldn't leave. Henry turned on his spotlight, bathing the vehicle in white light. Nothing moved. Then he noticed it, what looked like a small figure sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat. His pulse kicked. He stepped out, hand on his holster, boots crunching gravel. The night wind whispered across the fields, carrying the distant sound of a freight train. Too quiet. Too darn quiet. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3-4, Henry said into his radio. "I've got an occupied vehicle with hazards on. Occupant unresponsive, requesting backup." As he approached, the figure's outline sharpened. A child. Couldn't be older than 7 or 8. Sitting upright, hands in their lap, face turned forward. Something in Henry's chest twisted violently. Not again. Not another kid left to freeze in a car by some careless adult. He'd seen too many of those cases in his 28 years on the force. Children forgotten at gas stations, kids abandoned during custody fights, little ones caught in the middle of grown-ups acting like fools. "Hey, buddy," Henry called gently, stopping just a few feet from the door. "Are you all right? You hurt?" The child didn't respond. Didn't blink. Didn't move. Henry felt a pulsive dread crawl up his spine. Then from the darkness behind him, a sudden burst of laughter echoed. Cruel, snickering laughter. Henry dropped to his weapon as he spun around. 3 teens, maybe 17 or 18, stood behind his patrol car, hoodies up, phones out, recording. One of them smirked. "Dude, look at him. He thinks it's real." "Should have seen your face, old man," another cackled. The third one lifted his phone higher. "Yo, live stream this. Officer Collins is about to freak over a mannequin." Henry felt heat rise in his face, anger boiling under his collar. A mannequin? He whipped back toward the car. No, it couldn't be. But as he leaned forward, shining his flashlight into the driver's window, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. It was a mannequin. A child-sized mannequin, dressed in a blue hoodie, strapped into the driver's seat like some sick joke. His jaw tightened. This was no harmless prank. This was deliberate, targeted, staged. He turned back toward the teens. "Who put that there?" he demanded, voice low but shaking with controlled fury. The tallest boy shrugged. "Someone left it. We just got here." Henry took a step toward them. "You were hiding behind my car." The smirk never left the boy's face. "We wanted to see what you'd do. You old guys freak out over everything." Henry had been insulted plenty of times in his career, but this felt different. This felt mean, purposeful, like they'd chosen him because he was older, because he had gray in his beard, because he'd slowed down just a hair in the last year. Or maybe because they knew who he was. Officer Collins, the cop whose son had gone missing 20 years ago, the cop people whispered about, the cop whose life had never fully recovered. Henry swallowed hard, forcing his expression still. "You boys think this is funny, but you don't leave something like that on a road. Someone could have crashed. Someone could have gotten hurt." The boys snorted and rolled their eyes. "Relax, Grandpa. It's just a stupid doll." Henry clenched his fist. Before he could respond, a soft click came from inside the sedan. He froze. That wasn't the mannequin. Slowly, very slowly, the child-sized head turned toward him. The teens stopped laughing, and Henry felt his blood turn to ice, because mannequins didn't move. Not on their own. Not at 2 a.m. Not in total silence. He took one step backward. "What the hell?" one of the teens whispered. The mannequin's head angled further. Then its eyes, glass or not, seemed to shine. and its mouth twitched. Just once, but enough to send a cold ripple cutting through every witness standing on that lonely road. Whatever was sitting in that driver's seat was not what any of them thought it was. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Not Officer Henry Collins, not the 3 teenagers who moments earlier had been laughing at him, not even the night breeze stirring the weeds along the roadside. Everyone stood frozen as the mannequin's head, if it was a mannequin, completed its slow, unnatural turn toward Henry. Its glassy eyes reflected the beam of his flashlight, giving them an eerie, lifelike shimmer. A shimmer that didn't belong on plastic. One of the teens whispered, "Dude, is someone inside it?" Henry couldn't answer. His years on the force had trained him to expect anything. Armed suspects, drunk drivers, domestic fights gone ugly. But this was the kind of thing that made even seasoned officers' minds stutter. He forced himself to breathe and stepped cautiously toward the open road. "Back up," he told the boys, keeping his voice steady. "Move behind my vehicle." For once, they obeyed without complaint. The mannequin, child-sized, wearing a too-clean hoodie, sat strapped in the driver's seat, facing him now with impossible stillness. Henry's flashlight trembled just slightly. "All right," he murmured, trying to ground himself. "If this is some kind of trick, it ends now." He reached slowly for the door handle. The moment his fingers touched metal, tap, tap, tap. Something inside the car tapped 3 times against the window. Henry jerked back, heart slamming against his ribs. The teens scrambled behind him, swearing under their breath. "Officer, sir, something's inside with it," one stammered. Henry steadied himself. "All of you, get as far back as you can and call 911. Tell them officer needs immediate backup in possible child endangerment." The boys didn't argue. Their phones were out in seconds. Henry swallowed, placing his hand firmly on his holster as he leaned toward the window again, peering inside. His breath caught. At first, all he saw was the mannequin, but then, slowly, he noticed movement, a faint shifting beneath the mannequin's legs. A shape, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Huddled, trembling. A small hand poked out. Not plastic, not stiff. Real. Henry's stomach plummeted. There was a child in there, a real child, hidden behind the decoy. He exhaled, adrenaline slicing through fear like a hot blade. The tapping wasn't from the mannequin. It was from the boy trying to get out. He yanked the driver's door handle. Locked. Damn it. He circled to the passenger side, shaking the door. Locked again. Inside, the little hand reached for him, pressed against the window. The mannequin's head, still turned unnaturally, stared blankly past him. Henry gritted his teeth. "Kid, hang tight. I'm gonna get you out." He stepped back and drew his baton. With a precise swing honed over decades, he shattered the rear passenger window, glass exploding inward. The boy let out a tiny yelp but didn't cry. Henry cleared the frame with quick swipes of his baton, then unlocked the back door and pulled it open. The smell hit him first. Damp, musty, like dirt mixed with something metallic. The boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old, was curled up on the floor behind the driver's seat, a blanket wrapped around him. His eyes were wide, red-rimmed, and terrified. A bruise darkened his cheek. Henry's chest tightened. He slid inside carefully. "Hey," he whispered, "you're safe now." The boy didn't speak, just stared past Henry, at the mannequin. Henry reached down to scoop the child up and froze. The mannequin's fingers were curled slightly outward, like a hand had been inside them, like someone was controlling it. Henry swallowed hard. This wasn't a prank, and it wasn't just a hidden kid. Something far worse was at play. He pulled the blanket back a little and noticed something the teens hadn't seen. A bracelet. Hospital grade. With a name. Noah Chambers. Henry's breath caught in his throat. He knew that name. Everyone in the county did.
It was impossible not to. Noah Chambers was the little boy who had been reported missing 3 weeks ago. The search had gone county-wide, then statewide. Posters in every gas station, helicopters, volunteer searches combing forests. People feared the worst. But here he was, alive, fearfully alive. Henry gently lifted the child out of the car, tucking him into his chest. The boy clung to him instantly, startling him with the strength of his grip. "It's okay," he murmured. "I've got you. You're all right." Behind him, the teens stepped closer. "Is he really the missing kid?" one asked, voice shaking. "Yeah," Henry said softly. "Yeah, he is." The tallest teen swallowed, pale now. "Officer Collins, we didn't do this. We didn't put him here." Henry nodded once, eyes still on the mannequin. "I know. Because the boys weren't capable of something like this. This was calculated, hidden in plain sight, meant to be found just late enough to cause damage. And the mannequin..." Henry approached it again, Noah still cradled in his arms. The plastic face was childlike but wrong, too smooth, too symmetrical. The eyes, glass marbles, seemed almost intelligent in the shadows. He tapped the chest. Hollow. He leaned closer and saw it. A small circular opening in the back of the mannequin's neck, disguised beneath fake hair. A camera lens glinted within. Henry stepped back, chilled to the bone. Someone had been watching, recording, studying. For how long? He circled the car again, searching. Another discovery made his skin crawl. A burner phone taped under the driver's seat, set to record, and a GPS tracker nestled beside it. Someone had planned every inch of this, and whoever they were, they wanted Noah found this way, placed behind a mannequin in a staged abandoned car on a rural road where an older, slower to disengage officer would notice it first. It wasn't random, it was personal. Henry felt the weight of Noah in his arms. The boy was shaking, tiny fingers gripping the collar of Henry's uniform. The teens approached timidly. "What do we do?" one asked. "Stay put. Backup is on its way." Noah's voice finally broke through the silence, hoarse, tiny, trembling. "Don't let him find me." Henry stiffened. "Who?" he asked gently. Noah shook his head violently, tears welled. Henry leaned close. "You're safe now. Who hurt you?" The boy whispered one word, a word so soft he almost missed it. But when Henry heard it, his blood ran cold. Because it was a name he knew, a name that haunted him 20 years, a name tied to the disappearance of his own son. Noah whispered, "Collins." And Henry felt the night collapse around him.
For a moment, Henry forgot how to breathe. The night air pressed against him like a weight, thick and suffocating. The crickets, the boys, even the child in his arms seemed to blur into background noise. One word, one impossible, devastating word replayed in his mind like a siren. Collins. His name. Or rather, the name he shared, because Henry wasn't the only Collins in this county. Noah trembled in his arms, burying his face in Henry's uniform. The boy clung with a terrified desperation that no child his age should ever know. Henry forced himself to steady his voice. "Noah," he whispered gently, "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, but you have to tell me which Collins." The boy's tiny shoulders shook violently. He didn't answer. He just kept whispering, "Don't let him find me. Don't let him find me." Henry's heart hammered so hard it ached. Memories flashed through his mind, memories he'd spent 2 decades trying to bury. Another child, another dark night, another disappearance. Henry's own son, Jacob, taken at age 6, never found. A case that broke him, broke his marriage, broke everything. And the primary suspect back then, his own younger brother, Ethan Collins. A boy genius who grew into a failed man, brilliant, cunning, unstable,
and last seen in this very county years ago. Too clever for the law, too unpredictable for anyone to trust, too slippery to ever catch. And now, a missing boy whispered Collins like it was the devil's name. Henry swallowed hard, pushing the memories down. This was not the moment to fall apart. A child was still in danger, maybe more than one. He lifted Noah higher, supporting his head. "You're safe, buddy. I promise you." The boy let out a broken sob. Behind them, one of the teens, Tyler, the mouthy one, took a small step closer, voice shaking. "Officer Collins, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Henry didn't answer, because in a way, he had. He carried Noah toward his patrol car, his heavy boots crunching across gravel. But halfway there, he stopped. Something gnawed at the back of his mind, a whisper of instinct, a warning only years on the force could sharpen. He turned slowly and looked again at the abandoned sedan, at the mannequin, at the child-sized hoodie, at the straps holding it upright, at the cheap nylon wig covering its hollow head. Something about the positioning felt wrong, too deliberate, too staged, too perfectly attention-grabbing. He shifted Noah on his hip. "Tyler," he called out, "hand me my flashlight on the hood." Tyler rushed to grab it, eager to be useful now that things had turned deadly serious. Henry walked back toward the car and shined the beam through the open rear door into the front seat. At first, nothing looked different, but then his light caught it. A thin strand, barely visible, stretching from the mannequin's sleeve down to the floor behind the passenger seat. Fishing line, and not just one, several, connected to a small metal ring. He followed the line with the flashlight, slow, 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 and stopped where it disappeared under the front passenger seat. His pulse spiked. He crouched, peering beneath the seat. At first, he thought it was wiring, maybe a phone charger, but then he saw the shape. A device no bigger than his palm. Black, smooth, with a blinking red LED light. Not a bomb, not a tracker, a trigger mechanism, connected to the fishing line, connected to the mannequin. Henry froze. This wasn't a kidnapping scene. This was a setup, something that was supposed to activate when the mannequin moved or was moved, and Henry had just pulled Noah out of the car. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Everyone, get back, now." The teens jumped violently, stumbling backward. "Is it a bomb?" one cried. Henry's throat tightened. "Not exactly, but it's something dangerous." Still holding Noah, he leaned closer beneath the seat. The device didn't look military. It looked home-built, crude. But the wiring, it was distinctive, a style Henry hadn't seen in decades. Bootleg electronics wound together with obsessive precision, tiny components soldered with near-perfect accuracy. The same craftsmanship the police found in the abandoned workshop Henry visited 20 years ago, the one belonging to the primary suspect in his son's disappearance. The police never found Ethan Collins, but they remembered his building style. Henry whispered to himself, voice cracking, "No, please no." His flashlight beam trembled as he followed the final wire to a small black box taped to the inside of the seat. He leaned closer. Inside the box wasn't an explosive, but something equally horrifying. A recording device. Active, blinking, transmitting. Someone had been listening to every word said near the car, including Noah's whispers, including Collins. Henry swallowed hard, stood up, Noah clinging to him. The teens looked horrified. "What is it?" Tyler asked. "A recording device," Henry answered tightly. Someone wanted to hear the moment Noah was found. "Why?" the boy asked shakily. Henry took a deep breath. Because this wasn't just a kidnapping. He looked toward the dark woods surrounding the road. Someone is watching. The oldest teen, Marcus, cursed under his breath. "You mean the kidnapper is still out here?" Henry didn't respond immediately. Instead, he lifted his flashlight and scanned the tree line. Nothing but darkness could hide anything. He moved toward his patrol car, unlocking the back door with his elbow and placing Noah gently inside. The boy grabbed his sleeve. "Don't leave me." Henry squeezed his hand. I'm not going anywhere. I just need to check something. But as he stepped back, the boy whispered one more thing, voice trembling. He made me watch. Henry froze. Watch what? The boy shook his head violently, sobbing now. I don't want to remember. Henry knelt beside him. I need you to tell me what he made you watch. The boy looked up with eyes that had seen horrors no child should ever know. I watched him take other kids, Noah whispered. I saw what he did. Henry's breath caught. Other kids, plural. Where? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. In the woods, Noah pointed weakly. Beyond the road, behind the old cabins, the ones with the boards on the windows. Henry felt a cold shock ripple through him. He knew those cabins. Everyone did. Abandoned 15 years ago after a fire. Rumored to be haunted. But he knew better. Rumors were often born from truth. He stood up, jaw clenched. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place now, horribly, inevitably. The staged car, the mannequin, the recording device, the child hidden inside, the name spoken in fear. It all pointed toward one person, a ghost from his past, a man smarter than the law, more patient than a predator, and crueler than anyone could imagine. A man who shared his blood. Henry turned toward the woods. His flashlight beam drifted across the shadows. Somewhere out there, someone was watching him. Someone who already knew Noah was found. Someone who had planned for this exact moment. Something rustled deep in the dark. A footstep. A breath. A watcher slipping away. Henry stepped forward instinctively, hand on his gun. But before he could cross the tree line, his radio crackled to life. Unit 14, we're approaching your position now. Lights on the horizon. ATA 30 seconds. Backup. Finally. Henry exhaled shakily. For a second, he felt relief, but then, as he turned back toward his patrol car, the mannequin's head, now facing sideways, sagged forward and fell off completely, rolling onto the ground with a hollow thud. Something was written inside the hollow neck. Henry lifted it with trembling fingers. A message scrawled in black ink. Hello, brother. The flashlight slipped from Henry's hand, his world tilted. And for the first time in 20 years, Officer Henry Collins felt true terror.
For the first time in years, Henry Collins felt his knees weaken. The plastic mannequin head lay in the dirt like a severed skull, the black ink message vibrating through him with an icy familiarity he wished he'd never recognized. Hello, brother. His throat tightened so violently he couldn't swallow. Behind him, the flashing red and white lights from approaching patrol cars washed over the scene, distorting the world in strobes, trees turning red, teens turning pale, Noah curled in fear in the back of his cruiser. But Henry couldn't move. That handwriting, that mocking curve in the letters, that twisted sense of humor, it all belonged to one man. Henry! Hey, Henry! Officer Daniels jogged toward him, boots crunching over gravel. Jesus, what happened out here? We got your call. Kidnapped child, possible suspect? He stopped when he saw Henry's expression. What's wrong? Henry pointed numbly at the mannequin head. Daniels crouched, lifting it carefully with gloved hands. When he saw the message, his breath hitched. Oh, hell. It's him, Henry whispered. He's back. Daniels looked up sharply. Who? Henry didn't answer, because speaking the name felt like opening a door he'd spent decades keeping locked. They'd been chasing ghosts for 20 years, but ghosts didn't leave messages, and they didn't kidnap living children. Only one person from Henry's past would do both. Daniel stood, lowering his voice. Collins, are you telling me what I think you're telling me? Henry stared into the woods, where the shadows seemed thicker than before. He's watching us. Daniels felt a chill crawl up his spine. He glanced back at the teens who were huddled near the patrol cars under the supervision of another officer. Let's get the boy out of here. We need to secure the scene.
Henry didn't move. His gaze stayed locked on the woods. Because he felt it. A presence. A memory wrapped in skin. A pair of eyes. Eyes he'd once shared a bedroom with, watching him just beyond the darkened tree line. "Henry! Hey, Henry!" Daniel said again, firmer. "Let's regroup." But Henry stepped forward. He couldn't stop himself. Something deep inside him drew him toward the woods like a string tied to his chest, the same instinct that once told him his own son was in danger. He took 3 more steps. The night air shifted. A twig snapped. Every officer tensed, weapons rising reflexively. Daniel shouted, "Show yourself!" Silence. Then another sound, soft, rhythmic. Not stepping away, not stepping closer, just moving. Henry lifted his flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness, landing on something halfway between the road and the woods. A piece of paper, pinned to a tree trunk. "Stay here," Henry muttered. "Hell no, we go together." Henry hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, on my lead." They approached slowly, their steps synchronized, their breaths shallow, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge. Henry reached the tree first. The paper was held by a simple thumbtack, cheap, ordinary, as if placed there casually. His name was written in bold black marker across the front. Henry. Daniels exhaled shakily. "He knew you'd walk into the woods. He knows everything I do," Henry murmured. Hands steady but heart pounding, Henry pulled the paper free and unfolded it. One sentence, just one, written in a handwriting that haunted him. "I kept him alive for you." Henry's vision blurred, his tongue went dry. Daniels grabbed his arm. "Henry, talk to me. What does that mean?" Henry's lips trembled. "Jacob." The name felt foreign on his tongue, like touching a grave you never got to fill. "Your son?" Daniels whispered, horrified. "Henry, no, we searched for months, years. We never found a trace. Are you saying he took him?" Henry's voice cracked. "My own brother took my son." Daniel stood a step back, stunned. The weight of that sentence hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. "Why didn't you ever say?" "Because I could never prove it." "And now?" Henry looked back at the mannequin, the straps, the recording device, the staged scene, the taunt. "He's escalating. He wants me involved. He wants to play." Daniels cursed under his breath. The woods rustled again. The officers snapped their weapons upward, scanning every shadow. But Henry closed his eyes, because he recognized the pattern. This wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. When he opened them again, he spotted something else pinned to another tree a few yards deeper, a second note, swaying lightly in the breeze. Without waiting for backup, Henry strode towards it. Daniels cursed and ran after him. "Damn it, Henry, you're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking clearer than I have in 20 years. The second note was shorter, the handwriting shakier, almost childish. Henry's stomach lurched. He recognized it instantly. His son's handwriting, or what a 6-year-old's handwriting would have been if he were still 6. The note read, "Daddy, I'm scared." Henry staggered. His breath broke into pieces. Daniels grabbed him to keep him upright. Henry, look at me. Focus." But Henry was slipping, because this wasn't just a crime scene anymore. It was a resurrection of every nightmare he'd buried. He clenched the paper so tightly it crumpled. The woods behind the tree seemed to warp, bending with movement. Something or someone shifted between the trunks, silent and quick. Henry lifted his flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness, landing on empty air. "So you did get my present." Henry shuddered. "Did you hear that?" Henry didn't answer, because hearing it meant believing it, believing that the voice was real, believing that the ghost from his past was breathing the same air, believing that 20 years of torment had not only returned, but never stopped. Henry stepped deeper toward the woods. "Ethan, come out!" Silence. Then another whisper, closer this time. "So you did get my present." Henry shuddered. "We need to pull back. We have a child in protective custody. We need to secure the perimeter. Henry, this is a trap." Henry lowered his gun slowly. His eyes burned from unshed tears. He has Jacob, or he had him, and now he wants to finish whatever he started. The officers behind him shifted nervously. Radios crackled. The teens huddled closer together, eyes wide. But Henry's gaze was fixed on the dark path ahead. Somewhere in those woods, a man wearing his bloodline was waiting. Somewhere, a brother who turned into a monster was watching. And somewhere, maybe just beyond the next rise or behind the next tree, the truth was waiting too. Daniels touched his arm. "Henry, we'll find him, together." Henry didn't respond. He was listening to the silence in the woods, listening for footsteps, listening for the next whisper. Because if Ethan Collins was truly here, the confrontation had already begun.
The forest swallowed Henry's last shout, leaving only his ragged breathing echoing between the trunks. For one long, suffocating moment, the night stood still, the kind of stillness that comes right after a predator moves and right before it strikes again. Then, the world snapped back into motion. Radios crackled, flashlights swept the trees, backup units fanned out in cautious, practiced formation. But it didn't matter. The one man Henry wanted, needed to catch, was already gone. Daniel squeezed Henry's shoulder. "We have to regroup, now." Henry didn't fight him, not because he agreed, but because he physically couldn't muster the strength to resist. His arms felt like stone, his lungs felt bruised, his mind was a spinning carousel of memories he'd spent half his life trying to bury. He let Daniels guide him back toward the road, while officers secured the perimeter. By the time they reached the patrol cars, the teenagers had been moved away from the scene. Noah, still wrapped in a blanket, sat silently in the back seat of Henry's cruiser, tiny legs dangling, eyes red and swollen. When he saw Henry, he lifted his arms instinctively, like a toddler reaching for safety. Henry's heart cracked in two. He opened the back door, crouched, and gathered the little boy into his arms. Noah clung to him, burying his face in Henry's shirt. "I was scared," the child whispered, voice trembling. "I know. I'm here now. You're safe." But the words felt like lies, because for the first time in his entire career, Henry Collins did not feel in control. Behind him, Daniels spoke quietly with Sheriff Millwood, their voices hushed but urgent. 2 notes, one in the suspect's handwriting, one supposedly from Henry's son. The brother was declared missing the same year as the kid. "We're dealing with something bigger, Sheriff." Henry didn't turn around, but he heard every word. Every syllable hammered his ribs. Sheriff Millwood approached him after a few moments. "Collins," she said gently, "let's take this kid to the station. Get him warm, get him fed, get him talking." Henry nodded. "And you," she added softly, "need to tell me everything you've been holding back." Henry stiffened, because that was the one thing he feared more than facing his brother. Telling the truth. They arrived at the county sheriff's office shortly before midnight. Inside, the fluorescent lights washed everyone in pale, tired color. Officers moved in and out of rooms, phones rang, printers hummed, the usual controlled chaos of a small-town department. But tonight, everything felt heavier. Sheriff Millwood guided Noah into a private interview room, while Henry stood outside the glass, watching as a social worker offered the boy juice and crackers. Noah grabbed the drink with both hands and gulped like he hadn't tasted anything in hours.
maybe days. Henry swallowed hard. Daniels stepped beside him. Kid's traumatized, but he's tough. He'll pull through. Henry didn't respond. Daniels side-eyed him. You're somewhere else. Henry exhaled slowly. I'm 20 years back, Dan. Daniels nodded. Then let's go there, together. Henry closed his eyes. For years he avoided thinking about that night, the night Jacob disappeared. Not because he didn't remember it, but because he remembered it too clearly. Sheriff Millwood's voice pulled him back to the present. Collins, my office, now. Henry took one last look at Noah, then followed her. Inside her office, she closed the door behind them. The blinds were already drawn. She sat, folded her arms, and fixed him with a look that made grown officers confess to things they hadn't even done. Start talking, she said simply. Henry stayed standing. My brother, he began, voice hoarse. Ethan, he wasn't normal, even as a kid. Millwood didn't interrupt. He was charming, brilliant, but something was broken inside him. He liked fear, liked controlling it, creating it. Henry rubbed his face. When Jacob was taken, there were signs, but no evidence, no witnesses, no leads. Ethan vanished the same night. Sheriff Millwood's steely composure faltered for a fraction of a second. You think he killed your son? Henry shook his head slowly. He didn't kill him. Millwood leaned forward. How can you be sure? Because Ethan doesn't kill what he claims is his own, Henry whispered. He keeps it. A cold, jagged silence followed. Finally, Millwood spoke. You should have reported this theory years ago. I did, Henry said bitterly, but theories don't solve missing kid cases. Evidence does, and there wasn't a shred. It made me look desperate, delusional. So you stayed quiet. I stayed quiet because no one believed me, Henry corrected, and because if anyone pushed him, Ethan would make sure Jacob paid for it. Millwood absorbed that in grim silence. Then she laid her palms flat on the desk. All right, here's what we know. She ticked off points on her fingers. Your brother is alive, dangerous, still fixated on you, and he's escalating, openly taunting you, leaving clues, manipulating children. Henry's jaw tightened. Millwood continued. Collins, I need you to step back from this case. Henry's heart stopped. No. Henry, with respect, Sheriff, I can't. This is my son. And that is exactly why you can't be involved. You're compromised. Henry slammed a hand onto the desk. No one knows Ethan like I do. No one knows how he thinks. And that's why you're a liability, she snapped. He wants you involved. That alone is reason enough to keep you out. Henry's breathing quickened. She was right, and that terrified him, because Ethan always got what he wanted. Daniels entered without knocking. Sorry to interrupt, but you both need to see this, now. He handed Millwood a tablet. A video was paused on the screen, shaky, grainy footage from a cell phone. Millwood tapped play. A teenage girl's voice narrated in a hushed, excited whisper. We were like walking home, and we heard like laughing, but not normal laughing. This is the guy, the creepy guy. The camera tilted wildly before focusing on the tree line near where Noah had been found. Between the trees, a figure. Tall, thin, motionless, his face obscured by shadows. Then, just before the clip ended, the figure lifted a hand and waved directly at the camera. Henry's blood froze. Daniels whispered. He wasn't running from the scene. He was enjoying it. Millwood lowered the tablet slowly. This changes everything, she murmured. Henry straightened, because in that moment, the terror inside him transformed, sharpened into something else. Resolve. He's not done, Henry said quietly. Not even close. Daniels nodded grimly. Then we'd better figure out what he wants. Henry shook his head. I already know what he wants. Millwood looked up sharply. What? Henry's voice dropped to a whisper. He wants me. Silence wrapped around them like a shroud. Outside the office, Noah began to cry softly for his mother. Inside, Henry Collins stood tall, the storm inside him finally breaking open.
His brother had resurfaced. His son's trail had been resurrected, and the terror that had ruined his family was back to finish a game Henry never agreed to play. But this time, Henry wasn't running. He was ready, even if it killed him. By morning, the entire town knew. Before the sun even broke over the hills of Pine Ridge, whispers had already slithered through backyards, diners, barber shops, the church parking lot, and every Facebook group within a 40-mile radius. A little boy was found alone in the woods. A kidnapper was lurking just outside town, and Officer Collins was somehow involved. Some versions of the story were harmless speculation. Most were not. By the time Henry walked into the station at 7:02 a.m., he could feel the shift in the air. Conversations stopped when he passed, heads lowered, eyes followed. People weren't afraid of Ethan. Not yet. They were afraid of Henry. Daniels met him at the door. "Don't look at social media," he said immediately. Henry brushed past him. "I don't care what people think." Daniels sighed. "Well, you're going to care about this." He led Henry into the briefing room. Sheriff Millwood was already there, arms crossed, staring at a projection screen. On it was a local news report, playing on repeat. A reporter stood outside the police department, wind whipping her hair, speaking in a voice full of practiced concern. The mysterious discovery of 4-year-old Noah Garvey in the Pine Ridge forest has raised alarming questions. Sources say the boy may have been abducted by a man connected to an unresolved missing child case from 20 years ago, the disappearance of Jacob Collins, son of now Officer Henry Collins. Henry went still. The reporter continued. Residents are asking, how could one man lose track of 2 children linked to the same suspect? And why has Henry Collins stayed silent for decades about his brother's involvement? The segment looped. Henry clenched his jaw until it hurt. Daniels clicked off the screen. "This blew up fast," Sheriff Millwood added. "A town council meeting has been called for tonight, closed session, and Henry," she paused, "they want you there." Henry stared at her. "Why?" "Because they want answers and accountability, and because," she hesitated, "parents in this town are furious." Henry scoffed. "At me?" She didn't deny it. He dragged a hand over his face. "I expected this. I just didn't expect it so quickly." Millwood opened a folder. "We've had 12 complaints filed since sunrise, 6 from residents demanding you be removed from duty, 2 from parents claiming you attracted danger to the community, 1 from someone accusing you of covering up your brother's crimes, and 3 more suggesting you may have helped him." Henry's stomach dropped. "Helped him?" he repeated softly. Millwood's voice was gentle. "People are scared. Scared people think irrationally." Henry shook his head. "No, scared people look for someone to blame." Daniel stepped in. "Henry, we know the truth. No one here believes—" Henry cut him off. "Dan, this is Pine Ridge. Folks will believe whatever makes them feel safer. Right now, that means imagining this is my fault." A soft knock broke the tension. One of the deputies cracked the door open. "Sheriff, there's someone here to see Officer Collins." Henry frowned. "Who?" The deputy's face said it all. "It's Noah's mother." Maggie Garvey looked like someone who had cried through the entire night and still had tears left. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her hands shook as she clutched a wrinkled tissue. But her eyes, red, swollen, rimmed with exhaustion, were sharp. She stood as Henry entered the small interview room. Her voice trembled. Is Noah okay?" Henry nodded gently. "He's safe, sleeping now. The social worker said he asked for you." Maggie closed her eyes, pressing her tissue to her mouth. When she looked at Henry again, the grief in her gaze had twisted into something sharper, something defensive, protective. "You were supposed to protect him." Henry stiffened. "I found him, Maggie. He should never have been there," she shouted, cracking.
Henry swallowed hard. I know. I'm sorry. You're sorry? She repeated bitterly. You know what people are saying? That whoever took my son is connected to you. Her voice cracked again on the last word. That he targeted my son because of you. Henry stepped back, as if the words had physically shoved him. Maggie, he whispered. I didn't know. I didn't even know the boy was missing until... But the man who took him knows you. He knows how to hurt you, and he used my son to do it. Her breathing quickened. Her hands trembled harder. Henry tried to speak. She raised both palms to silence him. My little boy is traumatized. He won't talk, he won't eat, and all he does is cry for me and sleep in your jacket because he's terrified you're leaving him. Henry blinked back emotion. Why would a stranger use my son to torture you? Henry's pulse hammered in his ears. She wasn't asking, she was accusing. Maggie, he began carefully, the man who did this, he's someone from my past, someone I thought was gone. So the rumors are true, she said hollowly. This man, this monster, is your brother. Henry nodded slowly. Maggie's knees buckled. She fell into a chair, hands covering her mouth, breath shuddering. Henry knelt beside her. I'm going to catch him, he said softly. I promise you, Maggie, I will never let him near Noah again. She stared at the floor. You better, she whispered, because she didn't trust him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The rest of the day spiraled. Parents flooded the sheriff's office demanding answers. Reporters camped outside the building. Cars lined the street. Fear spread like wildfire, fed by gossip and half-truths. At 3:15 p.m., Henry was walking to the parking lot when a woman he vaguely recognized from the PTA marched up to him. You, she shouted, you brought this evil to our town. Henry froze. She jabbed a finger at him. I have 3 grandchildren in this city. You expect me to believe it's a coincidence that the same man who took your son just happened to come here? That he just happened to find another little boy to grab? Ma'am, Henry said evenly, this is not the place. It is the place, she shrieked. If another child goes missing, that'll be on you. Several people nearby murmured in agreement. A small crowd began to form. Henry raised both hands calmly. I understand your fear, truly, but the man we're looking for is dangerous and unpredictable. He's... No, another man barked. You are the unpredictable one. We don't know what's going on in your family or what you're hiding. Daniels quickly stepped between Henry and the crowd. Okay, that's enough. Everyone back up. But they didn't. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Henry felt the air constrict. This wasn't fear anymore. This was turning into a mob. Sheriff Millwood stormed out of the building a moment later, her authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone back up and clear the area. Her deputies pushed the crowd away, but the damage was done. Henry had seen it in their eyes. They didn't view him as a protector anymore. They viewed him as a threat. By early evening, Henry sat alone in his cruiser, parked behind the station where reporters wouldn't spot him. The quiet felt foreign, heavier than the shouts, heavier than Maggie's tears, heavier even than the forest. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. His brother had resurfaced. His son's past had been dragged into the present. A little boy had suffered, and now the entire town had turned against him. This was backlash, in every sense of the word. And Ethan was orchestrating it, playing him like a violin. Henry whispered to himself, "What's your goal, Ethan?" The radio on his dash crackled suddenly. "Unit 7, come in." Henry lifted the receiver. "Collins." Static. Then, a voice. Not dispatch. Not Daniels. Not anyone he recognized. Low. Calm. Mocking. "Little brother." Henry's blood went cold. "Ethan." "I see you're having a rough day," the voice purred. "People turning on you, doubting you, blaming you." Henry's fingers tightened around the radio microphone. Ethan chuckled softly. "Don't worry, I'll make things even more interesting soon." Henry forced out a breath. "Where are you?" Another small laugh. "Watching." always watching. Static swelled. And Henry? Henry's heart pounded. Tell Noah his drawing was very helpful. The radio went dead. Henry stared at the silent receiver. Noah? Drawing? What drawing? He scrambled out of the cruiser and sprinted back into the station. If Ethan had already seen something Noah drew, then Henry was already behind him, and whatever Ethan had planned next was already in motion.
Henry burst into the station like a man running from fire. Daniels jerked his head up from his desk. "Henry? What happened?" Henry didn't answer. He scanned the hall, spotted Denise, the social worker, stepping out of the break room with a stack of papers. "Denise?" he said sharply. "Where's Noah?" She startled, clutching the papers. "He's in the quiet room, sleeping. Why?" Henry approached fast enough that she instinctively stepped back. "He drew something yesterday, something he didn't want anyone to see." Daniels frowned. "What are you talking about?" "He told me he had a secret, something he didn't want me to show the sheriff yet, a picture, something from the woods." Daniels blinked. "And you didn't think this was—" Henry cut him off. "Ethan already saw it." Silence fell like a hammer. Daniels' voice lowered. "How?" Henry lifted the radio in his shaking hand. "He just contacted me, on our frequency." Daniels' face went white. "He hacked police radio?" "Oh, he's done worse," Henry muttered. "Come on." Henry pushed through the hallway toward the quiet room. Denise hurried after him. "Officer Collins," she said, breathless, "Noah didn't draw anything yesterday. He was too frightened to even hold a crayon. He showed me," Henry said firmly. "He hid it under the blanket when you weren't looking." Denise blinked rapidly. "What? But I—" They reached the door. Henry stopped, raised a finger, motioned for silence. Inside, they heard soft breathing. Noah was asleep. Henry slowly opened the door. The small room glowed softly with a lamp in the corner. Stuffed animals were piled in a basket. A blanket printed with cartoon bears covered Noah's tiny frame. Henry walked forward on quiet steps. "Are you sure?" Daniels whispered behind him. Henry nodded. "He hid it somewhere he thought no one would look, somewhere a kid thinks is safe." Henry gently lifted the blanket. Nothing. He checked under the pillow. Nothing. Denise frowned. "Maybe he imagined it. Trauma." "No," Henry snapped. "He drew something, and Ethan has seen it." He scanned the room. Kids hide things in patterns. Corners, behind furniture, under cushions, inside toys. Henry turned to the small plastic table in the corner. A cup of crayons sat next to a pad of paper. He crouched and flipped through the pad. Blank pages. Blank, blank, blank. Then he paused. The last page had been torn out. His breath stopped. Daniels whispered, "Did he tear it out himself?" "No," Henry said, voice tightening. "The tear is clean, too clean. This wasn't a child ripping paper. This was someone with strong hands. Someone like Ethan." Daniels exhaled shakily. "So Ethan came here? Inside the station?" Henry clenched his jaw. "He's been closer than we thought." Denise pressed her mouth to her mouth. "Dear God." Henry placed the pad back carefully, like it was a crime scene. "We need surveillance, footage from last night, every hallway, every entrance." Daniels nodded and rushed out the door. Henry looked down at the sleeping boy. What had he drawn? What had Ethan taken? And why? Inside the surveillance room, tensions ran high. 3 screens displayed feeds from the previous night, timestamps blinking. Sergeant Laramie tapped at the keyboard. "We've checked all main entrances. No one suspicious. Check the south corridor, near the interview rooms." Laramie clicked. Footage appeared. At 12:47 p.m., Denise walked Noah toward the quiet room. The boy looked exhausted, wiping his eyes, clinging to her sleeve. Then, at 2:03 a.m., a dim figure entered the hall. Henry leaned closer. The figure moved like a shadow, slow, deliberate, careful. A man in dark clothing, hood up, head down. He walked past the camera, almost invisible. Daniels whispered, "Is that him?" Henry nodded. Yes, that's Ethan. They watched as Ethan stopped outside the quiet room. He didn't try the door. He simply crouched, reached into his jacket, and slid something flat under the door. A piece of paper. Daniel swore under his breath. So Ethan gave Noah something. Then Ethan stood, walked down the hall, and disappeared out of camera view. Henry sank into a chair. Daniels turned to him. So Ethan didn't take the drawing, he gave it. No, Henry said slowly. Ethan gave him something else. The drawing Noah made, the one I saw him hide, must be from earlier, before this. Daniels frowned. Earlier? But where would Noah even get paper in the woods? Henry's blood chilled. He remembered the photo on the dashboard. Jacob and Ethan, brothers, always together. Ethan was recreating something, repeating a pattern. Henry whispered, "He's giving Noah messages, the same way he used to give me and Jacob clues when we were kids." Daniel stiffened. Clues? To what? Henry stared at the screen. To the next step. They returned to Noah's room. Henry crouched beside the boy again. This time he looked not at the bed, but on the floor. Kids hide things under rugs. He lifted the edge and froze. "Tape," he whispered. Daniels knelt. "What kind?" Henry peeled up a small corner. It was a folded paper taped carefully so it wouldn't slide out. Ethan had left it. Henry unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a child's drawing, done in a shaky hand. Noah's hand. A forest, stick trees, a small X marked on one, a cave-like shape, and next to it, Henry's chest tightened. A figure drawn with a circle for a head, but the eyes were scribbled out completely. Thick, dark strokes, angry strokes. "What is that supposed to be?" Daniels whispered. "It's Ethan. Noah drew Ethan with no eyes." "Why?" "Because Ethan probably blindfolded him." Daniel shuddered. Henry looked closer. Something was scratched in the corner. A symbol. A spiral. A spiral that Henry hadn't seen since he was a child. His voice cracked. This was Jacob's mark." "Jacob? Your brother?" "No," Henry whispered. "My other brother." Daniels froze. "You told us you only had one brother." Henry sat back, knees weak. "My father remarried me when I was 6. Jacob was from her first marriage. Ethan and I shared the same mother. Jacob was older than both of us." Daniel's jaw dropped. "You never mentioned him?" Henry stared at the drawing, heart pounding. "Because Jacob disappeared 3 years before Ethan did, and everyone assumed he just ran away." Daniels placed a hand on the table. "Henry, are you saying there were 2 boys missing?" Henry swallowed. "For years, I've believed only Ethan was responsible for Jacob's disappearance. But now?" Henry's voice was barely a whisper. "Now, I'm not sure." He lifted the drawing. The spiral was unmistakable. Jacob's mark, the one he used whenever he wanted to leave Henry clues during childhood treasure hunts. Daniels ran a hand through his hair. "So what does this mean?" Henry closed his eyes. "It means Jacob might still be alive. And if he is, then where is he now?" Henry set his jaw. "Ethan isn't the only one sending messages." Daniel stared at him. "You think Jacob helped Noah?" "I think Jacob sent a warning." Silence. Then a shiver ran through Henry's spine as the truth settled in. The hunt wasn't just for Ethan anymore. There was another player. Someone who knew the woods better than anyone alive. And if Jacob was alive, he'd been hiding for 20 years. Henry stood abruptly. "We're going back into the forest." Daniels blinked. "Tonight? Right now." Henry folded the drawing into his pocket. In Noah's shaky lines, in Ethan's taunts, in Jacob's spiral, a map was forming, a deadly one. And Henry was done waiting for darkness to strike first. The forest swallowed the last light of dusk as Henry stepped past the old service gate, his boots crunching over brittle leaves. The cold air stung his skin, carrying the smell of pine, damp soil, and something else. Memory. Every tree felt familiar. Every shadow felt alive. Daniels followed close behind, breathing heavily, flashlight in hand. "Henry," he whispered, "slow down." But Henry couldn't, not now. For the first time in 20 years, the past wasn't a fading ache, it was a trail, a living, breathing trail, and he was walking it again, older, heavier, carrying guilt that had hardened into a second spine. The drawing in his pocket felt like fire against his chest. The spiral, Jacob's mark. He stepped deeper into the forest, eyes scanning the surroundings. This place had been their playground before everything broke. Ethan, Jacob, Henry. 3 boys who once ran barefoot through these same woods, building forts, carving names into bark, swearing they'd grow old together. Then one day, Jacob vanished. And years later, Ethan too. Henry had lived with that guilt as long as he'd worn the badge. Tonight, he'd get answers, one way or another. They reached a clearing, a quiet space shrouded by tall pines. A single tree stood apart. The bark was torn by a long, deliberate mark, shaped into a spiral. Henry stopped breathing. Daniels whispered, "That's the same mark from the drawing." Henry nodded. "This is where we used to leave messages for each other." Daniel scanned the area. "Is this where he wants us to go?" "No," Henry murmured. "This is where he wants us to start." Henry stepped closer. He placed his hand on the spiral carved into the wood, shallow but unmistakable. His flashlight flickered over something at the base of the tree. A rock, flat, smooth, lifted slightly as if someone had placed it down recently. Henry knelt and turned it over. Underneath lay a folded piece of paper. Daniels cursed softly. Another note? Henry unfolded it. It was written in shaky but familiar handwriting. "Follow the hush." He froze. "What does that mean?" Daniels asked. Henry stared at the page, the words pulling him years backward. "When we were kids," Henry whispered, "Jacob used to say the forest had 2 kinds of paths, loud ones and quiet ones. Loud meant the ground crackled, twigs snapped. Quiet ones had soft moss, gentle soil." "The hush," Daniels murmured. Henry nodded. "He wants us to take the quiet path." He raised the flashlight and scanned the ground. 2 trails led from the clearing, one rocky, full of branches, the other covered in a soft carpet of moss. The hush. Without a word, Henry followed it. The forest grew darker as they walked, the trees huddled close, blocking moonlight. Every sound, every twig snapping, every rustle felt amplified. Daniels whispered, "Why would Jacob be helping Noah?" Henry said quietly, "Because Jacob never hurt anyone. He was running from something, not chasing." Daniels frowned. "Then who took him?" Henry didn't answer, because he already knew. He'd known for years. And now the truth was leading him through the trees like a ghost. The hush trail ended before a narrow drop-off that sloped into a ravine. At the bottom sat an old storm drain, rusted, half covered in vines. Henry's breath caught. He knew this place. "This is where we used to hide when Dad was drinking." Daniels blinked. "Your father? I thought—" "I never told anyone. Jacob took most of the beatings. He used to shield us. When he disappeared, I told myself he left, ran away, but deep down, I knew better." They descended slowly, boots sliding against loose dirt. A gust of cold air seeped through the drain bars. Daniels aimed his flashlight. Something moved inside. A shape. Small. Then larger. Henry drew his gun. "Show yourself." Silence. Then, a voice. Soft. Raspy. Broken. "Henry?" Henry's heart stopped in his chest. No, it couldn't be. But it was. A figure stepped from the darkness. A man, thin, pale, hair matted, beard unkempt, eyes sunken, trembling from exposure. But the shape of the face, the tilt of the chin, the voice. Henry's knees buckled.
"Jacob?" he whispered. The man flinched, covering his face at the beam of light. "Henry, you shouldn't have come here." Daniel stared wide-eyed. "Holy Jacob? Jacob Collins? You've been alive all these years?" Jacob swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for you to find me." Henry stepped forward, voice cracking. "Where have you been? Jacob, what happened to you?" Jacob shook his head violently. "He's coming, Henry. You shouldn't be here. He always comes back when he loses someone." Henry blinked. "Who?" Jacob's eyes filled with terror. "Ethan." Daniels froze. "Ethan? Your other brother?" Jacob nodded slowly. "Ethan wasn't alone in the woods that night. He brought me here. He said he needed me, but when I tried to leave..." Jacob clutched his own shirt, hands trembling. "He said if I ran, he'd come for the youngest next." Henry's blood turned cold. "Me?" he whispered. Jacob nodded. "I stayed because I thought he'd hurt you if I didn't." Henry felt sick. His brother, the one he thought he'd lost, had been hiding in these woods for 20 years. Not lost, prisoner of Ethan. Henry lowered his weapon immediately. "Jacob," he whispered, voice thick, "I'm getting you out of here." Jacob stepped back. "No, you don't understand. He's close. He always knows when people come this deep into the woods." Daniel scanned the trees nervously. "We need backup." "No," Henry said sharply. "Phones don't work here. He did that on purpose." Jacob grabbed Henry's arm, eyes wild. "He has a place, a camp, a hideout. Noah was taken there when Ethan brought him to the woods. He calls it..." Snap. A branch cracked somewhere behind them. Jacob's face drained of all color. "He's here." Daniels lifted his weapon. Henry turned slowly toward the sound. The shadows between the trees shifted, moved. Something stepped into the beam of moonlight. Tall, broad, steady, a hooded figure. Henry's heart clenched. "Ethan," he breathed. The figure lifted his head. A man stepped forward, same height as Henry, same jawline, same dark eyes, only colder, emptier. Ethan smiled faintly. "Well, looks like the family finally showed up." Jacob whimpered behind Henry. Henry tightened his grip around his gun, voice shaking with emotion. "Ethan, what did you do to him?" Ethan tilted his head. "What I had to. Jacob knows why." Henry stepped forward. "He's coming with us." Ethan smirked. "No, he's not." Jacob flinched. Daniels raised his weapon higher. "You move 1 inch and..." Ethan cut him off with a calm whisper. "You won't shoot me." Daniels tensed. "Why not?"
Ethan pointed at Henry. "Because he still loves me." The forest went silent. Henry swallowed hard. "You're wrong," Henry said. Ethan chuckled. "Maybe, but you didn't shoot me 10 years ago either, even when you had the chance." Daniels looked at Henry. "What is he talking about?" Henry didn't answer, because Ethan was right. 10 years ago, Henry could have ended this, but he didn't, and Ethan had disappeared before he could decide whether that made him a coward or a brother. Tonight, he didn't have the luxury of either. Jacob grabbed Henry's sleeve, whispering desperately, "Please, don't let him take me again." Henry took a slow breath. Then he lifted his weapon straight at Ethan's chest. "Let him go," Henry said, voice hard, "and this ends without blood." Ethan smiled wider. "Oh, Henry, you always were the soft one." He stepped forward. 1 step. 2. Jacob whimpered, retreating behind Henry. Daniel shouted, "Stop!" Ethan raised both hands mockingly. "I didn't come to fight." Henry's finger tightened on the trigger. Ethan smiled again. "I came to finish what I started." There was no more time. Ethan lunged. Daniels fired. Henry fired. Jacob screamed. The blast echoed through the forest. Silence crashed over them like a wave. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutched his side, fell forward into the leaves. Henry lowered the gun slowly, breath breaking. Daniels whispered, "He's down. He's done." But a small, trembling voice spoke behind them. "Daddy?"
Henry turned sharply. Noah stood halfway down the ravine, barefoot, shaking, holding on to the roots of a tree. Henry's heart cracked. Ethan tried to crawl toward the boy, blood smearing the ground. Henry stepped forward and kicked the gun away. Ethan gasped out one final whisper. "He belongs with me." "No," Henry said softly. "He never did." Jacob rushed to Noah, kneeling in front of him. "It's okay. You're safe now." Henry holstered his gun and approached slowly. The boy stepped toward him, tiny, scared, but trusting. Henry lifted him carefully into his arms. Jacob stared at Henry, tears streaming. "You saved him," Jacob whispered. "No," Henry said, looking at Noah and then at his long-lost brother. "We saved each other." Behind them, Henry lay still as the night swallowed him. A story that began with a car on the roadside ended here in the forest where everything began. And for the first time in decades, Henry felt the weight on his shoulders finally loosen. The last path through the trees had led him not to horror, but to truth, and maybe, finally, to healing.